From the Times and the Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Manveen Rana. It was the culmination of an almost 2-year-long legal battle. Last week, The Times and other media organisations won the fight to have a super injunction that had been used to cover up a huge government data leak overturned. The leak risked the lives of tens of thousands of Afghans who'd worked with the British military, and they weren't even told they were in danger. The government, with no oversight or accountability, had secretly spent at least £850 million on dealing with the consequences. It was a scandal when it broke, and now we have the fallout.
Now, a lawyer says that the brother of an elite Afghan soldier who was on the list was killed by the Taliban on Friday.
It has been revealed that the personal details of UK special forces and spies were included in the huge data leak.
This was a significant development, actually.
Not just the Taliban that are looking at these names, it's also Al-Qaeda, ISIS, the Russians, the Chinese. It's helping them build a picture up as to who our special forces are.
This episode raises significant constitutional issues.
Ministers who served under the party opposite have serious questions to answer about how this was ever allowed to happen.
How did this happen? How much danger could many Afghans now be in? And how much more will this cost the government? The story today: the Afghan leaks. What happens next? Would you mind just starting by introducing yourself to our listeners?
Hi, so I'm Tom Witherow. I'm a News and Special Projects reporter for The Times.
Tom, we first revealed this story last week when this super injunction was lifted and The Times was finally able to report this huge data breach that had taken place that risked the lives of tens of thousands of Afghans, and we knew was potentially costing the government a hell of a lot of money. We now know it's even worse. Just tell us what you found out.
So towards the end of last week, the compensation story was becoming a really important part of this. You know, we could see that there were thousands of people who are going to be going to the government to try and pick up what could be £10,000 or more each for being part of this league. And so on Sunday, I called one of the lawyers. That's a chap called Adnan Malik. He's the head of data protection for Barings Law. And after my chat with him, he spoke to Times Radio. We really wanted to find out, what kind of reprisals have people already suffered from this data leak? And that's when he told me that things had already turned deadly.
So our client essentially is a triple. So they're the equivalent of UK Special Forces. He's been in the United Kingdom for a couple of years, came over through the Arab scheme. He unfortunately received a call from his family on Friday informing him that his brother had been killed.
The brother of one of his clients, a former Afghan Special Forces soldier, had been killed by Taliban assassins out in Afghanistan. So, really shocking and tragic story.
And that's after the super injunction was lifted.
That's right.
Tuesday morning between 11 and 12 o'clock, the Ministry of Defence sent an email to individuals telling them that the data had been breached. A few minutes after 12, it was all over the news. No one was able to take any preventive measures within an hour.
And what the lawyer said was that it was his belief that it couldn't be a coincidence. He said that he believes the Taliban put two and two together and were able to say, right, this man is the brother of a soldier who worked with British Special Forces on important secret missions during that period, and that is why he's been targeted.
What I was informed by our client was the Taliban are openly making threats that they will A, stop individuals leaving who are on the list, and B, actively look for individuals that they know are on the list. Our client believes this is as a result of the super injunction being lifted.
What do we know about what happened to him?
Very little at the moment. This happened on Friday, so it's really very fresh. You can imagine what the family are going through at the moment, and for that reason, the lawyer was sparing with his details. He said the man in Britain is in his 40s. He's what's called a triple, so those were elite units of soldiers, of Afghans who worked with British Special Forces. British-run, funded, set up by Britain, and they said that the brother in Afghanistan, who's sadly been killed, was a police officer.
So this is effectively the brother of somebody who was in the Afghan SAS. And
That's right, yeah.
This was a police officer, and he's now been killed. It's a really tragic story. Do we know if there are other examples? I mean, do we think something is happening?
Yeah, so there's been a story in another newspaper that says that 10 people have been targeted by Taliban assassins and killed since that super injunction was listed. Now, there's not a huge amount of detail on those cases, and it's not clear whether those names were on the list. But what experts are saying is that looks like a marked increase in violence. And so this is kind of the key question now, isn't it? Are these people safe or on the list?
Given that there has been this marked change in violence, we do think it's gone up in the last week. Does that mean the Taliban have this list?
It's unclear if the Taliban do have the leaked list. They have been quoted as claiming to have obtained it since the data leak was revealed last week.
Right.
So I think that's something that will become clear in the coming days and weeks.
We now know that it's not just Afghans who are named in this data breach. Give us a sense of who else might be affected.
Yeah, so there were also around 100 names of UK Special Forces, MI6 spies and military officers. These were largely people who had given statements in support of people who had applied to the ARAP scheme to come to the UK.
I mean, just give us a sense of who else might be interested in it, apart from the Taliban.
I'm sure any of Britain's enemies, the Russians, the Chinese, you name it, they would be interested in getting hold of senior officers in these units, in these parts of government.
And do we have a sense of what was in the data? I mean, how much information will they have on them?
So what defence sources have told The Times is that the dataset contains personal information belonging to special forces and also spies and senior military personnel. And this runs all the way up to kind of brigadiers and major generals. And as I mentioned, these were people who had vouched for the Afghans who are coming to the UK on that relocation scheme. And then perhaps even more damaging is the fact that there were emails between government officials who are discussing individual cases, which obviously gives even more information about where these people might be and identifying information that could lead the Taliban to them.
This story came out a week ago, last Tuesday. Talk us through some of the political fallout since then.
Yes, I think the first thing we saw the day after the leak was Prime Minister's Question Time. There was shock amongst the journalists who had fought for 2 years to allow this information to be reported to the public, allow it to be released to MPs and Parliament, that there was not a single question as to why MPs and why the Intelligence and Security Committee had been denied information about this.
Just explain why. The leadership of the main party seems to want this to go away.
The questions over this scandal sit at both their houses. It started under the Conservative government. That injunction was applied for, and it continued right up until the election when ministers were continuing to say that it was necessary. And then when the new government came in, it wasn't dropped. And decisions were taken that meant that it's only now in the middle of 2025, a year after Sir Keir Starmer's government came in, that we're allowed to know about it. As the week has gone on, those questions are starting to surface again. And we learnt over the weekend that the ISC, the Intelligence Security Committee, is going to be launching an inquiry. It's going to be asking why this wasn't revealed to it in those kind of secretive quarterly updates that the security services are able to provide to that committee without it going out to the wider public. And so we will uncover more about that flow of information and why this wasn't only kept secret from the public, but even those select group of MPs and Lords who are there to scrutinise the work of the security forces.
And Tom, we should say that that committee, the Intelligence and Security Committee, it often takes evidence in secret. It is allowed to quiz MI6 and MI5, the security services, and they will be asking them questions about this, and yet nobody seems to be asking questions of the special forces.
Yeah, so as you say, that committee is focused on MI5 and MI6. The SAS and its leadership have had a big role in this scandal, and then also in the kind of broader issues with the scheme to bring Afghans to the UK. You know, the first thing is that the leak came from Special Forces headquarters. So how has that happened? Then Gwyn Jenkins, who at the time was the head of the Special Forces, went to a Cobra meeting about this and then tried to downplay it when he was asked about it at a later date. He's now the head of the Navy, and there were questions about his appointment to that over an unknown incident, which, as it turned out, was this leak. The SAS have also had more rights than other areas of the Defence Forces to determine who is eligible for these relocation schemes. And there's a question over the triples, highly trained units, British-formed units, these soldiers who took more risks and went on, these extraordinary missions, in many cases to hunt down the Taliban. Why were so many of them turned down for relocation schemes when other people who helped British forces, like translators and drivers, were able to come to the UK? There's been allegations that the SAS in the UK vetoed some people who worked with them because they were worried about what they would be able to say about some of the missions that were carried out many years ago. But none of these questions has really received that much scrutiny so far because there's no forum for it. And that's because all of these things fall under the Special Forces.
Wow, so this could be members of the Special Forces deliberately keeping people who had a valid claim to be able to come to Britain, keeping them out in case they revealed things about the behaviour of Special Forces in Afghanistan. That's very damning. And no accountability. Yeah,
the only way that we've seen the Special Forces come under scrutiny recently is the Afghan inquiry, where there are questions over whether war crimes were committed by forces in Afghanistan. But that's all there is.
Some of the Afghans, particularly the ones who are already here, are now sort of lodging complaints, sort of wanting compensation because their data was breached. And many of the people in Afghanistan who could still be affected too, I'm sure, will be coming forward. Give us a sense of the scale of that. I mean, how much of an impact could this have on the government?
The leak contained 33,000 applications to the Afghan relocation scheme. That's approximately 18,000 people who helped the government and 33,000 dependents, so it could be over 50,000 people. One of the lawyers I spoke to, this is a company called Bearings, which has about 1,000 clients now. They said that since the super injunction was lifted, they're getting an extra 100 clients a day. Then there are other firms, there's Leaday, which is a well-known solicitors firm, they're collecting names, and several other smaller firms are also coming in. So looking at the amount that they could be owed, the cost to the taxpayer could be hundreds of millions if they're successful. The figure of $1 billion was mooted on front pages last week. One of those people is a former Afghan general who says that his teenage son is at risk and that he's paying a sort of protection money to the Taliban in order to keep him alive. The government has said it's going to robustly defend those claims, but we're all used now to data breaches and claims coming, whether it's supermarket brands or whoever. It seems improbable that a case like this wouldn't result in some sort of compensation, given that on any measure, lives were put at risk. The government has said it will probably rely on the Rimmer Review, which was an independent review of this done by a former civil servant, which said that in his view it was highly unlikely that Afghans on the leaked list would face retribution, and that was part of the reason the super injunction was lifted.
Well, Tom, tell us a bit about that, because it's such a key part of that moment when the super injunction could finally come to an end, this internal review that the government had Rimmer conduct. What changed? Because they had reviews in the past. What do we know about that review and how is it going down in Westminster?
Yeah, to me, this is one of the biggest questions that's being asked amongst MPs is if there was such strong intelligence that the government felt it needed an injunction and a super injunction, a totally unprecedented move in the courts, 2 years' worth of secrecy over this huge, secret project to bring Afghans to the UK, the cost of all of that, the risk to lives. And then 2 years later, so that's now, the Rana report says it's highly unlikely that there's a risk. That doesn't add up. And I think that that's going to be something which will be an important question, particularly a question for the Conservative government, really, who were in power at the time.
And Tom, from everything that you've learnt, speaking to some of the lawyers representing them, what next for the Afghans who are on that list and yet still trapped out in Afghanistan?
I think it's just continuing uncertainty. Thousands have already been brought to the UK, but many, many tens of thousands are still waiting. And, the numbers remain unclear exactly how many people could be affected. But reporters who have been working on this story for years think that as many as kind of 50, 60,000 may just never be brought to the UK, and they could have this hanging over them for the rest of their lives.
That was Tom Witherow, news reporter here at The Times. The producers today were Olivia Case and Hannah Farrell. The executive producer was Edward Drummond. Sound design and theme composition were by Mal Assetto. If you can, do leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you'd like to get in touch with us about this or any other story, do drop us a line to thestory@thetimes.com. Thanks for listening. See you again soon.